For this video, we're going to work on solving quadratic equations by taking square roots. And we're going to look at example 10 from the Unit 2 on quadratics in your notes. So we're going to solve each equation by taking square roots. So remember, square roots is how you undo a square in order to get a solution. So if I look at this equation, I want to isolate the x squared just like I'm isolating a variable when I'm solving. So I'm going to add 31 to both sides. I have 4x squared remaining on this side, and on this side I'm going to get 80. Divide by 4, I get x squared equals 20. And then take the square root on both sides. So remember in the video before, for example 9, we had two solutions because of the symmetry of a parabola. So I'm just drawing a generic parabola here. But remember that there are two solutions because of that symmetrical shape that the parabola has. So here I'm expecting two solutions because I'm taking the square root. So when you do this, what happens is you say that there's a positive and a negative plus or minus the square root of 20. Because that gives you two different solutions, the positive square root of 20 and the negative square root of 20. And the reason that works is if you plug in negative 20 back into this part, the square root of 20, negative square root of 20 back into this, negative times a negative is a positive. So that's where that cancels out and you still get the same answer. Now with these problems, there's a way to simplify this radical. If you take a look, think about the numbers that multiply together to give you 20. So for 20, I've got 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 4 times 5, and then 5 times 4, which is the same thing. One of those numbers is a perfect square, meaning it's a number that I can square root. So if I rewrite the square root of 20 as the square root of 4 times the square root of 5, what's the square root of 4? Well, the square root of 4 is 2. So I can rewrite that as 2 root 5. So this is a simplified version of that answer. We would also have to say the plus or minus to keep the answer the same. Okay, let's look at letter B. There's a typo on here. This should be a negative 3x squared, so please make sure to add that. So here, again, isolate the x squared, subtract 9 on both sides. So I get negative 3x squared. 0 minus 9 is negative 9, and then divide by negative 3. So x squared equals 3. And then remember with that symmetrical idea, I should get two answers when I square root. So when I square root, I get x equals plus or minus the square root of 3. This one I cannot simplify because this number is prime, so there's no other factors other than 3 times 1 that give you that answer. Alright, for the next problem, same idea, I'm still trying to simplify isolate the x. So I'm going to undo the steps that are happening in front. So remember with a fraction, this means you're multiplying by 2 and dividing by 5. So I'm going to undo, I'm just going to rewrite the problem so it's a little bit easier to show my work. I'm going to undo this division by multiplying by 5 on both sides, because that takes care of that part. So I've got 2 parentheses x plus 3 squared equals 25. Now I can divide both sides by 2, and I get x plus 3 squared equals 12.5. To undo the square, you do the square root. So you get the square root of x plus 3 squared is x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 12.5. Because remember, for a quadratic equation, there are two solutions. With that parabolic form, we've got two solutions generally in your answers. So now this one, x is still not solved for. So how this one works is that you branch it into two questions here. and you say x plus 3 equals the square root of 12.5, or x plus 3 equals the negative square root of 12.5. Because I'm just breaking out my problem into the positive and the negative. And then I can subtract 3, and I get x equals negative 3 plus the square root of 12.5. And this answer is actually acceptable because this is actually the more accurate answer without rounding. Here I subtract 3 again. X equals negative 3 minus the square root of 12.5. So the reason I didn't square root 12.5 is because it's going to give me some weird decimal, and I don't want to deal with that weird decimal. So you've got two answers here, and they look a little bit different than we're normally used to seeing. That's all you do for solving by square roots.